Chosen one, your kindness is about to pay off big time, because without realizing it, you saved a billionaire at their lowest point. That ordinary moment you dismissed as nothing was an assignment sealed in the unseen. You showed up as yourself, and heaven marked it. Power tests quietly. It hides behind normal encounters to see who still leads with integrity. You passed. What you gave freely planted a seed. It's breaking soil now, soon. Most people move through life never knowing when greatness has brushed against them. You're different. You're chosen. Every move you make carries weight in dimensions you can't see. That billionaire wasn't randomly placed in your path. Heaven had been tracking a spiritual descent for months. This soul was approaching a point of no return, not financial ruin, something far worse, spiritual bankruptcy. The kind where success becomes a prison and achievement feels meaningless. This person already possessed everything society says to chase, yet nothing the soul actually needed was present. In that vacuum, darkness was making offers, subtle offers, the kind that don't look evil at first, just practical, just smart business. The slow surrender to cynicism, to viewing people as tools, to believing manipulation is just intelligence in action. A line was about to be crossed that would corrupt this person's influence permanently, and that's when you appeared. You didn't know you were walking into spiritual warfare, but you were. Your genuine compassion broke through at the exact moment when proof was needed that goodness still existed. You became living evidence that not everyone is corrupt, that purity can survive in a world designed to destroy it. Your energy disrupted the frequency of a downward spiral. You didn't preach, you didn't perform, you just showed up as yourself, and yourself was exactly the medicine a starving soul needed. Think about what you were carrying in that moment. You walked in with something this person hadn't encountered in years. Purity, not the naive kind that doesn't know better, the battle-tested kind, the kind that has survived betrayal and chose to stay soft anyway. Every person in that billionaire's orbit wants something. Every smile has a price tag. Every conversation is a negotiation. Then you appeared, genuinely not caring about status, wealth, or power. You saw a human being, not a resource to exploit. That simple act shattered something inside this person. It reminded them that connection can exist without transaction. Here's what makes this moment so powerful. You were facing someone surrounded by professionals at manipulation, people who have studied their patterns, crafted entire personas designed to extract value. Everyone is playing chess, everyone is calculating. The weight of that existence crushes the spirit slowly. The belief sets in that authentic human connection is extinct, that everyone everywhere is running some angle. Then you walked in with your guard down, your heart open, your intentions clean. You weren't trying to impress, you weren't positioning for anything, you were just existing in your truth. And that truth hit harder than any business strategy this person had ever encountered. Your softness became their awakening. For years this person had been surrounded by people, yet no one really saw them. Every compliment came with expectations, every friendship carried conditions. But your kindness had no invoice attached. You gave freely because that's who you are. You treated someone who deserved peace, not royalty to be impressed. In that simplicity, you did something profound. You reminded a soul covered in gold that a heart still beats underneath. Some people are so used to control that connection becomes foreign. Your energy didn't bow to power, and that unsettled them in the best way. It made them rethink everything. Priorities, relationships, the definition of success. For the first time in years, someone wasn't chasing their empire, just offering empathy. You became a mirror showing how disconnected this soul had become from itself. You were operating on a completely different frequency. While this person functions in financial currency, you operate in spiritual currency. Those are two different economies. When those economies collided, something alchemical happened. This billionaire had mastered the art of multiplying money. You've mastered the art of multiplying peace. You give from overflow, not calculation. You love without keeping ledgers. You help without tracking returns. That kind of generosity is foreign to people who measure everything in profit margins. To such minds, every gesture is an investment expecting returns, but your giving comes from a different source, from knowing that what you send out in light always comes back multiplied, not always in cash, but in favor, alignment, divine timing. When you met this billionaire, you weren't competing in their arena, you were introducing them to a new one. Transactions versus transformation, assets versus atmospheres. Your presence carries value that can't be monetized because it comes from a place inaccessible without surrender. This person had spent a whole life trying to buy stability, but your calmness provided more security than all their wealth combined. You didn't give them wealth, you gave them balance. That's what shook everything. Confusion set in about how someone with less materially could walk with so much abundance spiritually. Your energy exposed the difference between being rich and being resourced. You're resourced by God. Your peace doesn't fluctuate with circumstances. Your joy isn't for sale. Your worth isn't up for negotiation. That kind of richness threatens systems built on scarcity. While you were having what felt like a normal interaction, spiritual forces were watching. Heaven had orchestrated this meeting down to the second. Guardian angels had been sending distress signals for months. The darkness closing in wasn't just depression or stress, it was strategic spiritual assault. When someone carries influence over that many lives, their fall doesn't just affect one person. It creates a vacuum that pulls thousands down. Evil knows this. That's why the attack on this soul was so calculated. This person was being isolated from authentic connection, surrounded by yes people and manipulators, fed a diet of cynicism until believing the worst about humanity became their default. And once someone in power believes everyone is corrupt, corruption becomes self-fulfilling. It gets justified as adaptation, as survival, as being realistic. But it's really spiritual death wearing a business suit. You broke that cycle. Your kindness wasn't just kind. It was disruptive spiritual technology. It interrupted a frequency that had been playing on repeat in their mind. The frequency that says nobody cares unless they want something, that everyone has an angle, that trust is for fools and compassion is weakness. Your energy came in broadcasting a completely different signal, one that said connection is real, goodness still exists, not everyone is playing a game. And that signal, that frequency of pure intention, short-circuited the lies they had been fed for months. You didn't argue with their cynicism. You simply existed as proof it was wrong. That's more powerful than any debate. You can't argue someone out of darkness, but you can be light. And light doesn't convince. It reveals, it shows what's actually there once the shadows are removed. If this message speaks to your soul, hype this video so other chosen ones can discover it. You weren't sent to this billionaire as a preacher or a teacher. You were sent as a reminder, a living memory of who they used to be before money complicated everything. Wealthy people often carry a secret shame. They remember a version of themselves that was purer, more idealistic, back when making a difference mattered more than making profits, back when relationships mattered more than networks, back when they could still feel excited about simple things. But success has a way of burying that person, layer by layer, decision by decision, compromise by compromise, until one day the mirror reflects someone unrecognizable. They've become the person they once criticized. The person they promised themselves they'd never be is staring back. And that realization, that spiritual dissonance, creates a pain money can't medicate. When you showed up carrying the energy of that lost version of themselves, something profound got triggered. You weren't judging their current state. You were just being what they used to be, sincere, present, unguarded, and in your presence, they started remembering, not just intellectually. They felt it. The ghost of their better self started stirring. You reawakened a conscience that had been medicated with achievement and status. You reminded this soul that the person they buried isn't dead, just sleeping. And for the first time in years, hope emerged that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back. Not back to poverty or simplicity necessarily, but back to integrity, back to purpose beyond profit, back to measuring success by impact instead of income. Every betrayal you experienced taught you how to recognize authenticity. Every time someone used you, you learned the difference between connection and transaction. Every season you spent alone refined your ability to be complete without external validation. These weren't random hardships, they were targeted training. Heaven was preparing you to walk into rooms with people who have everything except what suffering teaches: empathy, discernment, depth, the ability to see beyond surface, to feel what's not being said, to recognize soul sickness even when it's dressed in success. You gave a heart that had everything, something it couldn't buy. Innocence, not the kind that's naive or unaware, the kind that has survived the world and still chooses to stay pure. This billionaire had spent years around people who smile with strategy and speak with calculation. Every kindness they received had a motive. Every connection was a negotiation. But you didn't play that game. You didn't treat them like an opportunity or a prize. You treated them like a human being, something they hadn't felt in years. That unfiltered authenticity was more shocking than any luxury they had ever owned. Your energy disarmed them. It stripped away the layers of ego they had built to survive in a world full of sharks. You weren't impressed by their status or blinded by their influence. You saw the person behind the power, and that melted the mask. Innocence carried by someone who's been through pain has authority. You've seen deception, been hurt by it, yet you never became it. That's what made your kindness hit so deep. You didn't just show goodness. You embodied integrity in a form they could feel. They were used to affection being leverage, but your energy had no hidden agenda. It confused them at first. People in their world give to get. You gave to give. It reminded them of who they used to be before greed and fear took over. Your innocence didn't make them feel superior. It made them nostalgic for the purity they had lost. You became living proof that goodness can exist without being gullible, that softness can coexist with strength. Your kindness didn't make them pity you. It made them respect you. They realized how heavy your light must be to still remain gentle in such a cruel world. You awakened something sacred in them, something money had buried, the desire to feel again, to care again, to love again. You didn't demand that change. You inspired it effortlessly. You woke a sleeping giant by being authentically small. Every room this person entered was filled with constant attempts to impress, outsmart, or use them, inflated egos and forced admiration everywhere. Then you appeared, calm, grounded, unbothered. You didn't need to prove anything. You didn't perform, over-explain, or exaggerate. You were just yourself, authentic, quiet, real. That simplicity cut through all the noise like lightning. You didn't chase their attention. You earned their respect without trying. That's when they realized they had been asleep. Hypnotized by power, success, and false validation, your humility became the alarm clock that woke them. The world they inhabit runs on performance. Everyone trying to be seen, stand out, appear valuable, but your energy came from knowing you don't need to be loud to be powerful. You didn't shrink, but you didn't inflate. You just carried truth, and truth disrupts illusions. Your humility confronted their pride without a single argument. It made them uncomfortable in the best way. It reminded them how far they had drifted from who they used to be. When someone like you shows up in their orbit, it's not coincidence, it's correction. Your presence exposed the hollowness behind their need for control. They realized they had power over people but not peace within themselves. You didn't try to change them. You simply stood in your authenticity long enough for their soul to recognize its reflection. That internal shift was the beginning of their awakening. The irony is you never saw yourself as powerful. You were just being human, doing what felt natural. But in a world addicted to dominance, humility is rebellion. Your energy silently declared you don't need to control to be strong. You don't need to impress to be seen. That message hit them deeper than any speech they had ever heard. You didn't compete, you convicted, not through confrontation, but through contrast. You gave them a glimpse of God in human form. You didn't show up glowing with halos or preaching scriptures. You just showed up as yourself, humble, genuine, real. But something in how you carried yourself, in how you loved without condition and helped without hesitation, made them feel something they hadn't felt in years. God, not religion, not ritual, that quiet, undeniable sense that heaven was closer than they thought. This meeting wasn't by accident. They encountered a presence that reminded them divine energy still moves through ordinary people. You weren't trying to be holy, you were simply whole, and that wholeness became the proof they didn't even know they were looking for. They had spent their life surrounded by power, yet starving for peace. They had met everyone with influence, yet no one with depth. People approached them for deals, connections, attention, but rarely with love. Then came you, not chasing, not demanding, not idolizing, just being light in its purest form. You became the interruption heaven used to remind them that God isn't confined to temples or texts. Sometimes God moves through tone, timing, touch. You became that divine reminder in human form. They may not have understood it in words, but they felt it. The atmosphere shifted when you spoke. Your presence calmed storms they couldn't explain. They started to feel convicted without you saying anything. Not because you condemned them, but because your peace revealed their unrest. You didn't quote verses. Your actions were the verse. Your gentleness became the sermon their soul had been waiting to hear. Your compassion did more than make someone feel better. It redirected the course of their life. You had no idea that your simple act of kindness, maybe just a few words of comfort or a gesture of understanding, was enough to interrupt a destructive trajectory. The universe pays close attention to moments like that. When a pure heart moves with empathy, it creates ripples that shift unseen timelines. This billionaire wasn't just having a bad day. They were standing on the edge of a decision that could have altered everything. Their peace, their purpose, maybe their life itself. They were about to sign off on something that would have corrupted their soul permanently, and your energy stepped in as divine interference. You didn't talk them out of anything, your spirit did. Spiritual law operates differently than logic. One authentic act of goodness from a pure heart carries more power than 1,000 calculated strategies. When love moves through someone chosen, it becomes a command in the unseen, a signal to heaven that says this soul can still be reached. That's exactly what happened. Your compassion opened a spiritual window in a heart that had been sealed by fear, greed, and exhaustion. You didn't save them with speeches or plans. You saved them by being light in human form, steady and sincere in a moment when they expected manipulation. The moment you acted out of selflessness, you set off a divine chain reaction. The heaviness around them began to lift. The confusion started to clear. The decision they were about to make, one rooted in emptiness, suddenly lost its appeal. That's not coincidence. That's spiritual cause and effect. There are moments when God disguises destiny as a stranger. You were that moment for them. What seemed like just another encounter, a simple conversation, a small act of kindness, an unplanned crossing of paths was actually a divine setup. Heaven wanted to see if they could still recognize goodness when it didn't come wrapped in status or shine. You weren't there to impress, you were there to reveal. Their response revealed their heart. When they chose to help, to listen, or simply treat you with sincerity, they unknowingly passed a spiritual test, because what they did for you wasn't about you, it was about what was still alive within them. They had become so used to transactional relationships, where everything was measured by gain, that grace had become foreign. But through you, God gave them one last opportunity to remember compassion, to prove wealth hadn't completely numbed their soul. When they responded with humility, heaven took note, not of the act itself, but the posture behind it. That moment became their unseen promotion. You were the vessel used to open a gate they couldn't access through effort or intellect. Divine doors don't open for the powerful. Doors open for the pure. By showing compassion to someone they didn't have to help, they aligned themselves with heaven's frequency. Your presence reminded them that righteousness isn't always wrapped in robes. Sometimes it comes wearing ordinary skin. You were never random. You were a spiritual checkpoint. The irony is you didn't even know it. You were just walking in your authenticity, carrying your light, doing what came naturally. But that light was a mirror heaven placed in front of them. It exposed whether their success had hardened or humbled them. In that moment, their reaction determined their next season. Spiritual architects are designing your reward structure. They're not just calculating what you gave, they're measuring the exponential impact of what you prevented. In divine economics, you don't just get rewarded for the good you create, you get rewarded for the evil you prevent. And what you stopped that day was catastrophic. This billionaire was about to make a choice that would have sent shockwaves through their entire industry, would have influenced policy, would have set precedents, would have normalized corruption at levels affecting generations. Your kindness interrupted that chain of events before the first domino fell. Heaven is calculating that prevention into your reward. That's why what's coming for you is so much bigger than the moment deserves. You didn't just save one soul, you saved an entire ecosystem from contamination. Think about the reach of someone at that level. Their decisions create culture in their company. That culture influences how thousands of employees show up in the world, how those employees treat their families, how those families engage with their communities. One corrupt decision at the top creates a cascade of corruption all the way down. One ethical stand at the top creates a cascade of integrity. You influenced which cascade got activated. You tilted the scales toward light when they were tipping toward darkness. And now every person who benefits from that tilt, every family that stays intact because an employee wasn't corrupted into putting profit over people, every community that thrives because a business chose contribution over extraction, all of that is being factored into your compensation package from heaven. I must interrupt this transmission for just a moment. Are you really chosen? Prove it. It's easy to watch videos about chosen ones. It's another thing to put yourself to the test. If you're still here, that means something, but talk is cheap. Real chosen ones take action. That's why I built Destiny Engine. It generates personalized sequences that help you rewire betrayal into transcendence, turn isolation into sacred power, and transform their downfall into your rise. We are using the Dark Elite's own weapons against them, taking their declassified consciousness technology that programmed competition and scarcity and repurposing it to serve divine justice. You put on the headphones, press play, and watch your enemies choke on the rope their own lies created. If you're done consuming and ready to prove you're chosen, start your Destiny Engine for $1 today. Join the Obsidian Inner Order live checks and watch divine justice accelerate in your life. Link in the description. Heaven doesn't do generic. Every blessing is tailored to the recipient, to your specific needs, your specific calling, your specific destiny. The billionaire you saved has been given an assignment by forces they don't fully understand. They're being positioned as one of the primary delivery systems for your provision. But they're not the only one. Heaven is assembling a coalition. People you've never met are being moved into position in your life, each one carrying a piece of what you need for your next level. Some bring finances, some bring opportunities, some bring connections, some bring wisdom, some bring protection, some bring acceleration, and all are being synchronized to show up at exactly the right time, in exactly the right sequence to build what heaven is building through you. Because here's what you need to understand. This reward isn't just about blessing you, it's about positioning you. You're being moved into place for your real assignment, the one you've been preparing for your whole life without knowing it. Every season of obscurity was positioning. Every season of struggle was strengthening. Every season of being overlooked was protecting you from premature exposure. But now the preparation phase is complete. The positioning phase is beginning, and positioning requires resources, requires relationships, requires favor, requires access, all of which is being assembled right now. That billionaire you saved is about to become a door opener, not because you manipulated anything, because they can't help it. Something inside them has been awakened that makes them invested in your success. This isn't obligation, this is divine compulsion. They're being moved by forces they can't name toward actions they can't fully explain. They just know they're supposed to help you, supposed to open doors for you, supposed to connect you, supposed to resource you, and they're going to do it with a joy that confuses even them. Your act of kindness created a spiritual bond between you and them that transcends the natural. You're now connected in the realm of destiny. What blesses them will root back to bless you. What prospers them will create overflow for you. You didn't just help them, you partnered with them. Not in business, in purpose. Heaven has linked your assignments, not because you're the same, because you're complementary. They have access to resources and rooms. You have access to purity and power. Together you create something neither of you could create alone. They bring the platform. You bring the message. They bring the reach. You bring the resonance. They bring the infrastructure. You bring the inspiration. You're going to start noticing patterns of provision that don't match your effort. Opportunities will come that you didn't apply for. Resources will show up that you didn't request. Connections will form that you didn't pursue. And all of it will have the fingerprints of the divine all over it. You'll know you didn't manufacture this. You'll know you didn't manipulate this. You'll know this is favor. Pure, unearned, overwhelming favor that came because you gave kindness without keeping score, because you showed compassion without calculating returns, because you loved without an agenda. Your reward won't come in the same currency you gave. It'll manifest as miracles logic can't explain, as protection appearing in places you didn't know you needed it, as abundance flowing without you straining for it. Heaven pays in favor, not just finances, in open doors, not just opportunities, in divine connections, not just contacts. Your kindness was a signal to the spiritual realm that you could be trusted with bigger assignments. That's why your life is shifting now. You'll notice things changing you can't explain, people being drawn to help you, resources appearing at the exact moment you need them, your name traveling to places your feet haven't gone. This isn't coincidence, this is consequence, the universe responding to what you activated when you chose to be kind to someone who had everything except what you freely gave. Doors will open that your qualifications don't explain. Favor will find you in places logic can't justify. Resources will flow to you through channels you never built. People will be compelled to help you without understanding why they feel so drawn to support your success. This isn't wishful thinking. This is spiritual law. What you sow in secret, heaven broadcasts in public. What you plant in humility, God harvests in abundance. The measure of your blessing is determined by the weight of what your seed accomplished. You didn't impact one person's day. You changed the course of a life that influences countless others. Every future decision they make will carry traces of the light you planted. Every act of compassion they extend to others will be ripple effects of your original kindness. This favor is going to confuse people who've been watching you struggle. They're going to try to figure out what you did to suddenly shift gears like this, what strategy you employed, what connection you leveraged, what secret you learned. And you won't be able to give them an answer that satisfies their linear thinking, because there is no natural explanation for supernatural provision. There's no logical path to trace for how kindness to a billionaire turns into resources for a chosen one. It only makes sense in the realm of divine mathematics, where one seed planted in good soil produces harvests that feed multitudes. You're going to have to get comfortable with not being able to explain your own success, with not being able to point to the ladder you climbed or the strategy you executed. Your testimony is going to be too supernatural for natural minds to comprehend, and that's acceptable. Let them wonder, let them question, let them try to reverse engineer what only God could engineer forward. Your job isn't to make them understand. Your job is to steward what you're being given, to honor the favor you're receiving, to stay humble while being elevated, to remain authentic while being celebrated, to keep your heart pure while your influence expands. Because here's the test that comes with this level of blessing. Can you handle increase without becoming what you just saved that billionaire from becoming? Can you access resources without losing your resourcefulness? Can you gain influence without losing your innocence? Can you build wealth without building walls? This is the test they failed and you helped them pass. Now you're going to face the same test. The difference is you've been prepared, you've been trained, you've been refined in ways they weren't. You know what it's like to have nothing, to need everything, to depend completely on divine provision. That knowledge is your protection. That history is your hedge. You won't forget where you came from because the journey was too hard to forget. You won't take credit for what you're receiving because you know you didn't earn it through conventional means. You won't hoard what flows to you because you learned in the wilderness that provision is always enough for the day. Your past poverty is actually your future protection. It taught you things wealth can never teach. It gave you perspectives privilege obscures. It built in you a foundation that can support the weight of what's coming, because what's coming is massive, bigger than you've imagined, more comprehensive than you've prayed for, more exceeding than you've dared to believe. Get ready for overflow, for more than enough, for surplus that creates opportunities to be generous yourself. You're about to understand why you went through seasons of lack. It wasn't punishment, it was preparation. You were learning how to steward little so you could be trusted with much. You were discovering how to find contentment in scarcity so you wouldn't lose yourself in abundance. You were building a character that could handle sudden increase without sudden corruption. And now that character is about to be rewarded, not just with things, with access, with authority, with assignment, with the ability to impact at scales you've only observed from a distance. The billionaire you saved is about to introduce you to a world you've never navigated, and you're going to navigate it differently than anyone else in that space, because you didn't come from that space. You came from struggle, from surrender, from sacrifice, and those origins give you a perspective that world desperately needs but rarely encounters. You're going to bring humanity to places that have forgotten what humanity looks like. You're going to bring simplicity to complexity. You're going to bring authenticity to performance. And it's going to disrupt systems that have been running on autopilot for generations. What makes your story extraordinary is the depth of what your kindness achieved. You didn't just change a mood, you changed a momentum. You didn't just comfort someone, you awakened them. You didn't just give love, you unlocked destiny. Every trial you endured, every pain you overcame, every moment you chose integrity over convenience, all of it prepared you for this exact moment. The universe saw your resilience and entrusted you with a mission few ever realize exists: to save, to elevate, to plant seeds that will blossom far beyond your immediate understanding. You've proven that purity, compassion, and authenticity are forces more potent than status, wealth, or influence. You have set a chain of events in motion that will not only bless you, but will continue to touch generations and shape destinies. Your story is proof that every act of genuine love carries weight, that the universe responds to integrity in ways the eye cannot see but the soul can feel. You are a living example that heaven always remembers those who faithfully carry light into dens of power. Your kindness has altered a life, a trajectory, a destiny. Heaven never forgets. Every unseen shift, every invisible ripple, every quiet correction is recorded in realms that transcend human comprehension. You have acted as a vessel for divine intervention, a mirror of truth, a reminder that real power, real value, and real transformation often arrive in humble, unassuming forms. The scales are shifting. The return on your investment of love is about to manifest in your reality with a force that will confirm everything you've always known deep in your spirit. That kindness is never wasted, that goodness always wins, that light always overcomes darkness. and that those who stay true to their divine nature, even when the world rewards deception, are the ones who inherit promises money can't buy and power can't counterfeit. Your breakthrough isn't coming because you're lucky, it's arriving because you're faithful, because you remained yourself when everyone else was pretending, because you chose compassion when calculation would have been easier, because you gave your best to someone who couldn't do anything for you in return, not knowing heaven was taking note of every word, every gesture, every moment of authentic care you offered. The reward for that kind of purity is always disproportionate to the act, because spiritual mathematics don't work like earthly economics. In God's economy, one seed planted in fertile ground produces a harvest that feeds nations. You planted your seed in the life of someone whose influence reaches further than you could imagine. Now that seed is producing a harvest that will not only bless you, but will continue to multiply through generations. Your season is shifting, your harvest is coming, and everything you've been through has led to this moment. The moment where you understand that what you thought was nothing was actually everything, where the ordinary kindness you gave becomes the extraordinary blessing you receive, where the light you carried in secret gets rewarded in public. This is your time, chosen one. Not because you demanded it, but because you earned it through staying faithful to love when the world worships power. The universe saw, heaven recorded, and now your reward is being assembled in dimensions beyond what you can imagine. Get ready. Your kindness is about to pay off big time.